because we believe that AI's true potential lies in its ability to deliver population scale impact, transforming education, healthcare, and agriculture for every citizen. However, that impact can only be possible when there's coordination that's built into the system. And therefore, today, we are here joined by global leaders to explore how open networks and digital public infrastructure can create a global, interoperable coordination rail, powered by AI to translate intent into action across borders. To set the stage, it's my honor to introduce James Manika. James is the Senior Vice President at Google, leading research, labs, and technology in society. He also served as the co-chair of the UN's High-Level Advisory Board on AI. James, welcome. The floor is yours to set the stage.
Thank you, Ashwani. Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure and privilege to be back in India and to join all of you here at the India AI Impact Summit. At Google, we believe that access to AI is essential for unlocking opportunities and expanding the innovation capacity for people everywhere. The rapid technological progress that we're seeing in AI's development is really quite breathtaking and represents an extraordinary opportunity to solve problems and empower people, power economies, advance science, and tackle some of society's greatest challenges. Indeed, we're beginning to see the impact of this. So it's not just in the future, but we're already starting to see some of these benefits and impact materialize today. Take science, for example. 5 years ago, our AlphaFold system, which is our Nobel Prize-winning innovation, solved the 50-year grand challenge of protein structure prediction. And since then, the freely available AlphaFold protein database has been used by more than 3 million researchers in over 190 countries. And in fact, India is actually the fourth largest adopter and user of the protein database, where people are working on a variety of problems, everything from neglected diseases, all the way to even breeding resistant soya beans, and a whole range of things that are incredibly beneficial to people in India and beyond. But to take full advantage of this potential, we need to collectively expand access right from the beginning. As you may have heard our CEO Sundar Pichai say yesterday, we need to ensure that the digital divide does not become an AI divide. Digital public infrastructure and open networks are an important part of making this possible. They provide the coordination layer that allows AI to translate human intent into real-world action. And India has been leading the way with systems like UPI and Bashini network and infrastructure, bringing the capabilities of AI into the daily lives of people across the country and at population scale. At Google, we've been a very committed partner in this journey by helping to build the foundations that help to scale it. For instance, our collaboration with the Indian Institute of Science, and in particular on Project Vani, has now completed its second phase, where we've been covering every Indian state, making speech data for over 100 Indic languages available for free through the Government of India's Bashini mission. In fact, this includes 20 languages that had never been recorded before digitally that we're now building onto these systems in ways that truly attempt to reflect India's true linguistic and cultural richness and diversity. And we continue to build on our commitment to drive scaled impact at the grassroots level. This commitment to scaled impact is reflected in our recent partnership with the World Bank, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later today. Together, we're taking a blueprint born right here in India and scaling it by localizing it across the globe to countries from Brazil to Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Kenya. And the heart of this blueprint began with our partnership with the government of Uttar Pradesh. There, we piloted a Gemini-powered open network for agriculture that provides farmers with multilingual AI agents to facilitate everything from credit to crop prediction. By taking the lessons we learned in Uttar Pradesh, where digital tools drove real, measurable impact. We're proving that a smallholder farmer can compete and execute on the value that they create rather than the platforms that they're on. This isn't just a regional success. It's now a global architecture and a model that can be taken everywhere for global digital inclusion. The success of these networks depends on a single fundamental principle. It must remain decentralized and open. This is the driving force behind our support for the Networks for Humanity Foundation. Again, one of the things we'll talk about this morning. And through a $10 million Google.org grant that we announced last year, the Network for Humanity Foundation is building the universal tools for tomorrow, from the FinInternet for asset tokenization to the Beacon Open Networks. And by establishing innovation labs from Singapore to Switzerland, they're ensuring that the infrastructure of opportunity is a global standard and not just a local exception. Having this type of infrastructure in place is what will allow all of us to collectively achieve population scale change. That's why we're supporting change makers like Wadhwani AI through Google.org grants that try to embed intelligence directly into the digital rails for millions of Indians to be able to use. In healthcare, for example, this means empowering something like 1.4 million frontline workers with multilingual AI assistants, providing early warnings to combat child malnutrition across the country. In agriculture, it means integrating AI into the national pest surveillance system to protect India's most important crops at a national scale. And in education, it means delivering high-quality learning experiences through AI-led transformation of government-owned education and development platforms. And this is an initiative that's already reached 10 million students and educators with the goal of empowering as many as 75 million students and nearly 2 million educators by the end of 2027. Ultimately, to fully capture AI's beneficial potential, we must be bold and responsible and be committed to building all of this together. We must pursue AI's most ambitious possibilities while ensuring that we build the coordination layer necessary to bridge and close the AI divide. With that, it is now my great pleasure and honor to welcome an extraordinary group of incredible leaders and innovators to the stage who've been doing this for an extraordinarily long time with incredible impact. First, I'd like to invite Nandan Nilekani. Nandan is the Nandan is the co-founder and chairman of Infosys. He's a global leader in digital public infrastructure and the co-founder of Networks for Humanity, an initiative building open, interoperable digital infrastructure for the intelligence age. I should say I've known Nandan for a very long time. When he first told me what he was working on 15 years ago, I'm not quite sure I quite believed him, but here we are. Next, joining us is Sangbu Kim. Sangbu is the World Bank's vice president. Sangbu is the World Bank's Vice President for Digital and AI, leading efforts to drive digital economy growth in developing countries by strengthening infrastructure, cybersecurity, data privacy, while modernizing government services, and also touching many areas like health, education, and more. Our third guest is Kiran Mamzuma Shaw. As chairperson of the Biocon Group, Kiran is a pioneering biotech Kiran is a pioneering biotech entrepreneur, healthcare visionary, and a passionate philanthropist committed to expanding access to healthcare through affordable innovation. And finally, please welcome Sunil Wadhwani. Sunil is a visionary entrepreneur and philanthropist who co-founded the Wadhwani Institute for Artificial Intelligence to drive systematic and systemic social transformation through AI solutions and innovation in the public systems across healthcare, education, and agriculture. So we're now going to have a conversation. I can't wait to be in conversation with these extraordinary leaders. Nandan, let me start with you. You've been championing digital decentralized ecosystems for a very long time, building open networks, taking things to extraordinary scale in India, and recently with Beacon and Finintech. And obviously, you bring a lot of credibility to both users of these systems and to regulatory bodies. How do you see AI as a multiplier or a factor as you think about open networks and the kind of transformational change you've been pursuing?
No, I think AI is very fundamental, and I'll explain how open networks and AI come together. I think, what some of us have been thinking about is, if AI is a general purpose technology, what is the fastest way of diffusing the use of AI in a productive way for people? And because ultimately all this is only makes sense if people's lives improve. And I think we have a lot of experience with open networks. I mean, in some sense, UPI was an open network for payments, and the open architecture led to the massive growth and became the world's largest payment system. So a lot of those principles are embedded in Beacon, and we have other examples. But I think open networks allows many actors, many innovators to build applications on the edge using AI. And I think we keep talking about agents, but I think the real power of agents is removing complexity for the user. So if a user is there who is a farmer or somebody who is producing a little bit of electricity, if they can very easily transact with somebody else through an agent, which is in their own language, then suddenly this is inclusion at massive scale. So I see really AI agents on an open network as the fundamental construct for massive diffusion of technology.
And also the importance, as you mentioned, of doing that in languages and local languages.
Totally. I think you talked about what you're doing at IISc. I think there are many initiatives in India which essentially are driving to make language completely accessible. Because language is not just a pure language. I mean, the way Indians speak, they mix the English, Hindi, and Tamil in one sentence. So how do you deal with that? How do you recognize that? So I think all that is getting addressed. There are many initiatives, Voice AI, there's AI Bhashini of the government, there's AI for Bharat, there's your project, the Google project. So I think there's lots of stuff, but fundamentally I think language as a barrier will go away. So if you combine language, so a person talks to the agent in their own language, and then if the agent does some transaction with hiding all the complexity behind it, then that's the holy grail, right? We can get everybody on the system, and that's how AI will get diffused.
Right. And then speaking of, you mentioned farmers and agriculture. Sangbo, let me come to you. I mean, the World Bank recently launched AgriConnect initiative. First of all, I'd like you to describe that a little bit. I think it's intended to make what smallholder farmers do much more efficient and scalable. But I'm curious, what has that work taught you so far about the type of global standards that are going to be needed to scale local solutions?
So, if you just go to look about the AgriConnect in Uttar Pradesh for now, so it is very farmer-oriented approach to provide very coherent and consistent services at the same time with OpenStack, open network. That means, if you think about the previous day, from the computer innovation, mobile innovation, now we are seeing AI innovation. I would interpret this evolutions from the supplier-oriented service environment to the customer, user-oriented environment. In that sense, some open standard and open network is a really crucial part to make sure user-centric service. So it is very efficient and affordable solutions for in AI era to fully provide quality of service to the user. In that sense, this AgriConnect project is really important, but it is not only for agriculture project. With that, we are really looking forward to expanding to another sector like healthcare and another education part. So it can be a very universal network in the future.
That's pretty powerful. In fact, speaking of healthcare, you mentioned you're taking this to healthcare. Kiran, you've been an incredible advocate and innovator when it comes to thinking about medicine as a whole. And you've talked about this idea that we need to move beyond the industry of medicine. And say more about what you have in mind about what we need to move to, and in particular, how you can connect what's going on maybe with AI and data sets with fundamentally transforming medicine.
So I think I have to answer this in two parts. The first part is how do we basically leverage what Nandan referred to as the digital stack to a health stack. That is the first big opportunity we have. And I think India is a country that can uniquely create a global reference model when it comes to the use of AI in the kind of health data that we're collecting. So for instance, India is beginning to collect a lot of health data in its health stack, you know, and it's phenotypic, it's genomic, it's demographic, and radiological data. Now, and of course, treatment and treatment outcome data. Now, when you start collecting this data, I think the whole objective, again, which is a holy grail, which is universal healthcare delivery at scale, in a sustainable way, and how do we reduce the disease burden? I mean, and increase lifespan. All these are big challenges and a very complex set of solutions. But I think this is a starting point where you get this huge digital stack of health data. And because India has this open source and the consent-based kind of secure data sharing model already established in UPI, I think we should quickly, you know, apply this to healthcare. And when you do that, you will start risk profiling your population at a demographic level, which I think is very exciting,
Yeah.
and at scale. And if you can integrate insurance into that, that will be even more powerful. That can only be done by AI. So AI has the opportunity to risk profile very fast, to try and find interesting insurance models, to see how we can marry the risk profile with the insurance instrument. Not easy, but I think it's a good challenge because AI can be given a lot of exclusion-inclusion criteria, which it can adopt. So I personally am very excited with what AI can do for health, digital health, and the whole universal healthcare delivery model. Additionally, of course, India has this unique model of ASHA workers. If ASHA workers can be empowered with AI, that is even more powerful. So I think, you know, deploying AI for the common people, the common man, is very important to both Nandan and Samgut's point of view. Now coming to my excitement about your second question, about what is it that I'm looking beyond this. Beyond this, I'm looking at advancing medicine using AI. Now, biology on its own was limited because it didn't have the kind of power of technology to get deeper insights. AI, like what you've just done, AlphaFold, AlphaGenome, is going to give it immeasurable opportunities to understand biology. And to me, biological intelligence is just amazing. And if you combine it with artificial intelligence and bring that convergence, I think we are in for huge transformation. And when I look at you know, biological intelligence, when I just look at cell biology, you know, how cells signal, how cells create circuits, how cells regulate, how cells connect and disconnect. I mean, the human body, living systems, have distributed data centers. And these data centers are connecting, disconnecting with sips of energy, not gigawatts of energy. Right. And they're actually translating that into instant information and decision making. If we can learn that and apply it to AI, I think it's going to be transformational. I am really looking forward to reprogramming cells. Right? That's the holy grail.
Yeah.
How do you convert a cancer cell into a non-malignant cell? How do you basically look at regenerative science? How do you look at lifespan? I mean, your biggest question today is, how do we shift from hospital-centric care to primary and community care? That can happen with AI, with predictive and preventive medicine, and that's, I think I've said enough.
Yeah, well, it would actually take us, in effect, Kiran, it would probably take us from kind of treating diseases to preventing diseases. And I like it, you and I were talking earlier, you and I and Demis were talking about this idea of someday we should be able to try to build virtual cells, models of virtual cells, and be able to do, a kind of cell-based biology, basically.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the exciting things.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, well, we'll come back to that. But I want to come to you, Sunil, which is, I'm curious, Sunil, as you think about what you've been doing, what role does DPI and open networks play in developing and scaling the kinds of solutions to some of society's most pressing problems? I mean, you've been thinking about this for a very long time, from way back when you set up the AI Institute, way before most people were thinking about these things. But I want to hear what your perspectives and experiences have been.
Thanks, James. Good morning. Just so we're all clear, there's a lot of intellectual horsepower on the stage, and it's all on this side of me. I'm basically here for my good looks. So just so we manage expectations. But when I set up Wadhwani AI back in 2018, and Prime Minister was good enough to come and inaugurate that, basically we had a huge benefit, which is the following, to your point, that over the last 20 years, the government of India has developed a set of DPI, digital public infrastructure, that is broad and that is deep. And this DPI are basically digital building blocks that connect policy, program implementation, public service workers, and citizens in the country. So, and I'll give you a couple of examples, but these, again, these digital public, this DPI provides two key, very practical, down-to-earth functions and benefits, as I see it. Number one, they provide data and data pipelines. And for AI, you couldn't build AI for the social sector without the kind of data and the data pipelines that they provide. Secondly, this DPI provides distribution channels so that once your inference models are ready, these AI platforms, again, developed and managed by government, provide a distribution channel to get our AI models out at scale. Without these, trust me, the usage of any model in the public sector, in the social sector, would cost incredibly more and wouldn't scale anywhere near what we see. So two quick examples, one in healthcare, one in education. So one of the challenges, one of the national health priorities for the government of India for the last several years has been the elimination of tuberculosis, TB.
Yeah.
It's the largest infectious disease killer in the world, kills close to 2 million people a year. It's the largest infectious disease killer in India, kills close to 500,000 people a year in India. And for each person that unfortunately dies, 20 other survivors live miserable lives, and it impacts their life, their ability to earn a living. So the government asked us to come in and see what we could do. And we identified with the government what are the 3 or 4 key pain points in the patient's journey. First one is diagnosis, and diagnosing TB in economically vulnerable communities isn't easy. X-ray machines, sputum analysis, et cetera, these are all challenging, they're expensive, they're time-consuming, they're tedious. So that's challenge number one. Secondly, if you do sputum analysis, these have to go to 64 government labs around the country. There's throughput time, and by the time the patient gets the results back, you've lost some time in initiating treatment for the people who have TB. And finally, there's a huge problem that there's a subset of TB patients who stop taking their medication because it's a very toxic regimen of medications, which has a very toxic effect on the body. The problem is once you stop taking them, you develop drug-resistant TB, then the mortality rate goes up dramatically to 50%, and then you infect a lot more people and so on. So fortunately, the government has a DPI called Nikshay. It's a very large data platform. It's a patient management system that has data on all of the detected TB cases in the country. Government gave us access to that database. We developed a range of models. And to address these challenges that we saw in the patient care journey, for diagnosis, we've come up with a way of diagnosing TB from the sound of a cough into a smartphone. It's instant, it's quick, it shows you what the risk is of that patient having TB, and so government workers can focus on those patients. In the 1 year or so that this program has started getting rolled out, the diagnosis part, using the sound of a cough, detection of TB patients has gone up by 25% nationally. You may think that's bad news because now there's more TB cases, but they were there. But now we can make sure they get treated. On the labs and the turnaround time, we've come up with an AI way to automate a lot of this testing. So now literally you get the results the same day. Patient and the doctor finds out instantaneously, and then they can start treatment. On the issue of patients who develop drug-resistant TB, we've come up with algorithms that predict which TB patients are likely to fall off their medication regimen. And so the 2,000 or so TB caseworkers in the country, which is a small number for the 4 or 5 million TB patients that we have, but now they can target their time and bandwidth on the subset of patients that really needs help. But all of that was enabled by this DPI called Nikshay, this database, which enables all of this. One other quick example in the education space. In the global south, including in India, there's a very high dropout rate of students in early grades, grades 1 to 5. So we got a call from a large state government in India about a year back saying, can you help? We took a look at it, and it turns out that the single key reason for this very high dropout rate in early grades, grades 1 through 5, is the inability of these young children to read proficiently in their mother tongue. If you can't read properly, it'll affect how you do in all your subjects, geography, history, science, everything. You start failing, you get frustrated, your parents say, "Theek hai, come back home, work on the farm, work in the kitchen," etc. And that affects the rest of their life. So we've come up with a system to diagnose within 20 seconds for each child by just speaking into a phone, into our model. In 20 seconds, we figure out exactly where they are struggling, what words, what phrases, what sentences, and what will help them get on the right track. And this is being done at the cost of 5 paise per student. I think cost is another very big part of scaling that doesn't get discussed too much, but cost is very important. So 5 paise per student. While this was in pilot, the suite of solutions we came up with, so we've got a way, like I said, of assessing in 20 seconds where the student is struggling. We come up with a diagnostic and then come up with a remediation plan and exercises for each student to practice at home to improve their reading. The state was so impressed with the pilot, they made it mandatory for all 3 million kids of that age in school. 3 or 4 other states, including the state of Rajasthan, just made it mandatory for all 8 million kids over there. And by the way, all of this, again, enabled by DPI. So Rajasthan has a state-level DPI called Rakshak. Our system, our models sit on top of that system. It reaches 400,000 schools, 8 million students, and it's spreading. So now the government of India, by the end of next year, wants to make the standard across the country. All 75 million children of that age group will get their reading improved and strengthened through the systems that we have. Bottom line, all enabled by DPI.
No, I mean, those are very... Those are incredibly powerful examples. In fact, the case of TB is actually one that's super important because something like 40% of people in the world go undiagnosed with TB. And in fact, most of them are in the global south. But it also just brings me back to maybe a question of scale. I mean, Sangbu, in what you're doing, you mentioned a few countries, but I think your goal is to get, with some of these education and health solutions, to like 25 countries or more. How are you thinking about kind of taking that to kind of multi-country scale? And how, what are some of the ideas you have about how you do that?
Beyond agriculture, as you said, we are piloting and have a lot of good projects in many countries. For example, in Kenya, we have some pretty good number of progress of math education with very simple AI math tutoring solutions. can achieve the same, academic goal within 6 weeks, which usually takes longer than a year long process. So that's one example. In Nigeria, also not only just TV, some very small handheld ultrasound device can scan the pregnant woman and then easily diagnose some problem for baby, and then it drastically reduce the the baby death rate. So it is another example. How can we scale this up? Another good example, as you said, we are expanding the current India model to other 3 African countries, and in Brazil, we added one more in Philippines.
Okay.
And then one of the way is that how can we really find some very standardized and scalable model? But this is not easy. But from the one concrete example, like in India case for Agriculture Connect, we are figuring out what would be the best way and lighter model we can quickly replicate to other countries. This is our role. The World Bank is trying very hard to figure out what that means and then how they can really replicate this model to other countries, and what would be the really critical component to be replicated. So this is our role. So we are just keep working on what would be the best simple model is. So in that sense, we usually, I'm not sure it is really right analogy. I'm using this analogy as a sommelier. We are not innovation creator. There's a bunch of really good, the wine producers, but our customers is not really, aware of which wine is really fit for their taste. So as a sommelier, the World Bank is trying very hard to understand the wines and then find some better, recommend the better wines for our customers' taste.
Yeah, but I think on this question of scale, I mean, those are
Do
great
you need any
ways
help on quality control with these wines?
Yeah, but I think on this question of scale, I mean, Nandan, I've heard you say that, we won't get to true population scale unless we actually scale things like inference in AI and how we do that at massive scale. And I'm just curious for you to expand on that a bit more, but also what lessons and implications might even have for people like us who are building frontier models. Say more about why the inference part of this really matters.
Yeah. No, I think broadly speaking, I think especially in the global south, the cost of AI inference has to drop dramatically, because if you're serving a customer with one query and that costs 500 rupees or something, it's not going to work. So we have to make it really, inference has to be, which I think, you'll do that because, I mean, there's a lot of focus today on the training side, getting bigger and bigger models and launching them. But I think as that sort of stabilizes, I think the focus will shift on the inference side to make inference cheap. But I think I'll give you an example of a very tangible example of open networks, given AgriConnect. Yesterday I was talking to Demis, and Demis was saying that Google is improving its weather models.
Yep.
They're making it better, more efficient, more predictive, more granular in where it, area by area and so on. Now, if you had an open network for agri, like AgriConnect, which suppose it has millions of farmers, then all we need to do is just plug in the latest weather model of Google into that open network, and suddenly 10 million farmers have access to the latest weather data. That's a good example of why this open network thing is important, because it allows you to plug new models, new sources of capability, new ideas, and so on. And I think that's what we're doing. And to give another example of how it reduces the complexity, if there's a very interesting demo here of energy trading. Now, we never thought of energy as something that you traded because you bought it from the utility. But today, with millions of people producing energy, they're able to, somebody has a rooftop solar, there's some extra energy, they can sell it to somebody else. But how does a farmer in UP learn how to sell energy? It's a whole new concept. It's only by an agentic commerce interface that is simple. So I think low-cost inference combined with agents that hide complexity is the key to massive diffusion.
Yeah, no, in fact, I like the example you brought up on weather because in some ways, thanks to the, quite frankly, the forward thinking of part of the Indian government and the Ministry of Agriculture, they've set up that infrastructure. And in fact, last year they used one of our models, Neural GCM, which predicts monsoons. Yeah. And we're actually able to deliver, I think, to something like 38 million Indian farmers predictions about the monsoons. But that only worked because the Indian government actually set up that kind of infrastructure where you could plug in these models. Kiran, I want to come back to you because I mean, in some ways, you raised some more foundational questions here about the future of biology and health overall. I mean, and I've heard you say, for example, that in fact, AI doesn't replace biology, that biology is much, much more fundamental and foundational. Say more about that, and what can AI learn from biology and vice versa? And what do you imagine, what needs to happen to fully take advantage of?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, biology works through distributed data centers, okay? And when it wants to build intelligence, retrieve memory, and inference data, it does so with sips of energy, not with gigawatts of power that our data centers.
So we could learn something from biology.
So I think we can learn something from that. I think more fundamental to that is that biology also has generational learning. You know, if you think about how our DNA stores generational memory, I think that's fascinating. How does the Arctic tern fly out of its nest for the first time, travel 70,000 kilometers to the Antarctic and back? It has navigational intelligence embedded in its DNA. How does that work? So I think we have to learn a lot from biology and use AI to learn that biology. Because without AI, you cannot have any insights into biology. So I just feel that the future is going to be about the convergence of biological intelligence and AI. And that is going to be a very powerful, transformative process. Because biology has a lot to teach AI in terms of how to do it with less energy, how to do it rapidly, and how to multiplex multimodal data very rapidly. Now, that is something which I think is very exciting. And I think to go back to what you've just been discussing with Nandan and others, I think what makes it very exciting right now is the volumes of data you can contribute on open networks. Yeah. I think we have to talk about, I mean, I know I work with a lot of, organizations around the world in my field. There's a huge reluctance to share data. You know, there's a lot of wariness about IP being, fragmented. And therefore, I think except for India, there's a lot of this resistance to share data. Now, when you don't share data, you're going to silo it. India has this unique opportunity because of its, this open networks and the public digital infrastructure to share volumes of very important data, like Nandan just illustrated, in terms of the, the environmental data that he was talking about, the climate data, and farmers taking huge advantage of that. That is what we have to really, really focus on, because India is uniquely positioned in terms of its open networks. And if we can actually keep generating data and then make the cost of inference because of the economies of scale, then you have a winning formula.
I'm being told that we're going to have to wrap this up. But before we do that, though, I want to just see if we can do a quick lightning round, so to speak. I mean, this summit has been extraordinary. The example that India is setting for the world, quite frankly, is extraordinary. If you could say, each of you say, one thing you'd like to see happen in the next 12 months, particularly with this idea of open networks and change at population scale, what would that be? I don't know who wants to go first.
I think I'd like to see massive diffusion, where all these applications that are just rolling out on open networks reach millions of farmers students, patients, and so on, and actually show the world that AI is a force of good. I think we have an obligation to show that, otherwise I think the pushback will be huge.
That's good.
Yeah, I definitely want to see a sustainable standard of care, high quality, universal healthcare coming out of this AI effort and the health stack.
That's preventative, presumably.
Absolutely.
As opposed to-
diagnostic, preventative, predictive, and precision. Because you can't do away with treatment, but how do you basically stage it upfront?
Upfront. Sunil or Sangwoo?
Yeah, so yesterday when the Prime Minister spoke at Bharat Mandapam, you know how he has been saying for years, make in India for the world. He said, in the age of AI, let's develop in India and let's deliver to the world. So in our case, as just one little example at Vadvani AI, I've given you 2 or 3 examples of what we've done. But we've developed over 25 AI platforms in India in education, healthcare, agriculture, which are scaling up. What's interesting is over the last year, we've had an incredible amount of incoming interest from governments throughout the global south, in Africa, Asia, and so on, who are hungry for these solutions. And they're looking to India to provide these. In fact, when PM Modi launched our institute back in 2018, you know, he was saying the US is so far ahead, China is so far ahead. I said, Mr. Prime Minister, we can set the example in India for how AI can be used for societal transformation. No one else is doing that. We are showing how it can be done.
Sangwoo?
So for the next 12 years, I really want to work more to disseminate the really good use cases to our client, country and people. One of the reasons is that some big challenge for the people in developing world, they do not clearly know what they can do with AI, even though it can provide really much affordable and easiest way to expand their capability and productivity and intelligence. So in a very easy way compared to the old days. So once again, they can get to know, oh, this is a real important opportunity for them, and then I can believe that they will really find some really good way to fully utilize this one in a very affordable way.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, at least what I'm taking away is that it's not just the example that India is setting for India and the world, but also, quite frankly, the example that each of you is setting, because all of you in your work and your organizations and your teams through your initiatives, but also your philanthropy and, quite frankly, insight, have done a lot to show what leaders can do. So I appreciate the examples that you're setting and the example that India is setting. Please join me in thanking my panelists here. Thank you, and I think with that we'll draw to close. Thank you.
Just request you all to be seated 30 seconds more. First of all, could we just please have another round of applause for our esteemed panelists? Very insightful. Thank you very much for coming here. The true benefits of AI, the discussion shows, can only be realized when we build for everyone using open networks. Very insightful conversation. Thank you, James, for moderating it. And to further help drive population scale impact, we invite change makers and researchers to apply for the 2 google.org impact challenges. One is in AI for science, one is for government innovation. There's a QR code for you to learn more. And I encourage you all to visit us at booths 3 and 4 in Hall 5 to see firsthand how Google AI is delivering a real-world impact. And finally, I just request all the panelists to please join center stage for a photograph. Thank you, everyone. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much.
I wish you that more.
I know. It's actually my fault I came late.
No. But, you know, for me personally, it's just inspiring to see.
Thank you. See you. Terrific. Thanks. Good to see you.
Come on, they want to take a picture.
Okay, all right. Okay. Come.
Take a picture.